going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now.
Jimothy.
Now, ladies and gents, again we return with a live duel, something that I'm going to try and be a bit more consistent on with regards to this, hopefully doing at least one live duel a week. Now today we are featuring Orcust and I believe it's Myutant Thunder Dragon Chaos, I believe. There was a deck profile that went up live not too long ago on the channel, and I will leave a iCard in the description for you. So starting us off, I am going to set a card. I believe I set an Orcust Crescendo, and then I get to normal summon my Girsu and activate its effects. Now obviously Girsu is a very powerful card. It is hand trap bait, to be honest, and to be honest, if that never went through, I'm not too sure how good of a position I would have been in because I was lacking on extenders. But anyway, it is what it is. So off Girsu, I sent Orcust Nightmare, just to be able to kind of like start off my plays. Now obviously once you banish your Orcust Nightmare to activate its effect to dump a card from deck to grave, you are locked into dark, so that's something that you do need to bear in mind, ladies and gents. But anyway, activating Girsu's other effect to special summon a token to both players' fields. Girsu is actually crazy because if you do normal summon him to a column a monster is in already, he actually becomes a tuner, so you can do a whole host of things. Borrowload Savage Dragon, you can go straight into the chaotic magical dragon. It's crazy what it can do, and it's also a one card Galatea, which is real easy. But anyway, I link off the initial token into a Link Karibo. Just thinking about my plays here, trying to decide which direction, which route to take. Now I do like to make sure that my trap cards are live, and because Orcust Crescendo is such a high impact trap card, I've tried to kind of like basically include it and make it live and make it useful, to be honest. So I was thinking to myself, what should I do here? But anyway, I decided to activate my Orcust Nightmare Engraved to dump a World Legacy World 1 to the graveyard. And then that's obviously going to be able to banish itself from the graveyard to special summon back one of my banished monsters, which is going to be the Orcust Nightmare that initially banished itself. And the great thing about Orcust, ladies and gents, this can just happen over and over and over again. Like, this deck can grind. It can grind crazy. A lot of their cards resolve in grave, so Abyss Dweller is a bit of a problem for this deck, but just being able to just continuously cycle your cards through your graveyard and just amass advantage because of it is just crazy. So I decided to go into a Link Monster. Still a bit undecided about which materials I should use for that Link Monster, but we all know that it's going to be the Galatea, for example, because that's normally the play that you want to get. You want to get your Orcust orchestrated babble live initially, and then you want to follow up with searching for a crescendo. Now I actually play 2 crescendos in my list. I value it that much, mainly because when it's in grave it's a search, and if it gets discarded off any of the dangers, I can search for Gizmecha Rochi, I can search for another Orcust monster. It's really powerful by banishing it from the graveyard, and obviously being a trap card, it's spell speed 2 by nature, so it's just I just find it useful. It's a bit of a consistency bump. It is a brick if you can't get it out your hands, but for the most part it's not too bad. So obviously I'm going to be able to shuffle in one of my banished monsters, which is going to be my World Legacy World 1, one of my banished machine monsters, to be able to set a Orcust spell or trap directly from the deck, which is super useful. So just thinking about what my next play could potentially be. Assessing a board, I'm thinking to myself, should I go into Girsu? Could I go into Rusty? There's a few options that I could go into here, and potentially Rusty would have been a better play, but upon thinking about the deck that I'm playing and talking to my opponent, I started to think, wait there, I want to be able to play on his turn as much as possible. So potentially there's a few cards that allow me to do that real quick, and because I've got Babble on field, unless he's running some spell or trap card removal, I should be able to do that pretty effectively, as long as I can get a few Orcust monsters into the graveyard to be able to start stuff off. So again, I'm assessing my hand, thinking about what to do here. Now obviously this is a bit of a friendly match, ladies and gents, so time proceedings are not so much a thing here. We can take as long as we want. These are decks that we're not as familiar with as we are with other decks, so there was a little bit of time for thinking, and there was a little bit of time for deliberating and deciding what to play. So I decided to go into Girsu to get rid of the token on my opponent's field. So Dingisu is actually just a crazy card. Non-targeting removal, send from field, goodbye Dragoon, goodbye cards that cannot be targeted, so very useful. Now with the Thunder Dragon Mutant strategy, with the recent release of the is it the Underworld Goddess from Blazing Vortex, because it can spit out so many monsters, I think that's going to be a card that is going to be really useful in this deck. Being able to link off one of your opponent's critical monsters is going to be super powerful. So anyway, I decided to link off Dingisu and my Gisu to be able to summon my IP Masquerena. And I'm still deciding what to do. I didn't want to overplay. I believe I had a Ghost Belt in hand, and I left IP Masquerena on the board by itself. Now, if there's something that you need to realize, ladies and gents, is just how to play around certain cards. Now, what you want to do is force out the IP Masquerena by trying to attempt to go into battle phase, because she can only activate her effect in the main phase. So when he normal summons his first monster, I think it's Mutant Mutant MO5, I initially go to activate my Orchestrated Nightmare or Orcust Nightmare in grave to be able to dump a Orcust monster, and that is going to be in the form of Symbol Skeleton. Now obviously Symbol Skeleton allows me to revive a monster from grave. Now Dingisu is a very good target, but also so is Galatea, mainly because I've got the Orchestrated Crescendo set, and I want to make sure I use that or utilize that to its fullest ability on my opponent's turn, might I add. And you need to be able to control a Orcust Link monster for that to become live, so that was my idea behind the way that I was playing. Now obviously I wasn't fearing any hand traps as such, because he would have hand trapped me initially. So it wasn't a Mutant MO5, I believe it was a ST46, because he's added the Mutant Fusion, the spell, to be able to activate his effect, and then he decides to activate another effect. So I decide to chain my Symbol Skeleton in grave to special summon back my Galatea. So Galatea's effect will be able to shuffle in a banished machine monster. Once his I believe the effect should resolve on a separate chain, as far as I'm aware, because turn player gets priority, but there could be a little bit of discrepancy in timing there, ladies and gents. So definitely get at me in the comment section below to tell me what should have been the correct sequence in there. But either way, we both get off our effects, so Galatea will then resolve. So just splitting a deck here, and then Galatea should resolve to be able to shuffle in one of my banished machine monsters to be able to set a Orcust spell or trap. So I shuffle in the Symbol Skeleton just to kind of like keep it in deck, just in case I draw into Gizmek or Orochi for any reason. It's better to kind of play safe than sorry. I could have left it in a banish pile and put an Orcust Nightmare in there, but I've already got Orcust Nightmare in deck, and I've got my setup ready. So ideally I want to be able to get stuff out the graveyard to then further play. So I decided to add another Crescendo because I wanted to kind of call the bluff, because he didn't know that I set the initial Crescendo. The second one isn't going to be live, but it might make him a little bit more relaxed about his plays, because he's seen me set the second Crescendo and he knows that I can't activate it that turn because it's a trap card. So yeah, so again, continuing the plays here. So with this, you really need to pay attention to the sequencing, ladies and gents. Obviously I want to get my Crescendo off because I want to be able to then use my Galatea and my IP Masquerena for another disruption. So ideally the next card to be activated, or the next card to be used on my opponent's turn, I'm going to be looking to have some kind of interaction with that card specifically. So my body's just deciding on what play to do. He's got a few cards in hand. He's looking at his mutant cards, and he's potentially looking to play a fusion card, I believe. Checking his extra deck just to see what options he's got. Now we do have a few things on board, ladies and gents. He could potentially, if he could get another monster on board, he goes to activate his Mutant Fusion just to see if there's kind of any response from me. So he activates his Fusion. and he wanted to banish from grave. So because I have Ghost Ball in hand, I get to obviously negate that fusion, because it would have had to banish one of his monsters. So that fizzles. So that's one more resource out of his hand, gone, done and dusted. So that's a nice little trade right there, ladies and gents. So then he's still considering his options. He knows that IP Masquerade is going to want to tag out at some point, but he doesn't know that I've got these second crescendos set waiting for some kind of power play, basically, because that just negates and banish as an omni negate, which is really powerful. So he's already used his normal summon. He decides to discard the Thunder Dragon Matrix, targeting his Thunder Dragon Hawk, just to get fuel in the graveyard to fuel his Thunder Dragon fusion. And then I flip my initial crescendo, which will negate and banish the card, which is really powerful, because obviously if Thunder Dragon fusion is in the graveyard, you can actually get a search off it, which is really crazy. That card is very, very powerful. So again, I've still got an interruption here. I'm just waiting for my opponent to do something. I believe he decided to, or declare to pass turn. So I decided to check my extra deck. I'm going to activate IP Masquerade's effect to obviously go into a link monster, which the monster of choice is going to be a Nightmare Unicorn. And then Unicorn will have to discard for cost, targeting his beast to be able to shuffle it back into the deck. And I just wanted to check that it was discard for cost, mainly because I discarded a danger monster and I wanted to see if it would get its effect off, but because it was activation cost, I believe it does not. So the danger monster hits the graveyard and Mutant Beast gets shuffled into deck. Now his battle phase is effectively over, ladies and gents, because his Thunder Dragon Hawk is in defense position. He can't actually do anything, and he gets bounced back to the hand at the end of the turn, mainly because of the effect of how it was summoned. So just checking my graveyard here, seeing what my potential options are. I looked for Orchestrated Crescendo, and what I was reading, ladies and gents, is just to check if you could use both effects in the same turn, because obviously I've got the other crescendo set on the field, which was set last turn by Galatea's effect. So I'll banish the initial crescendo, which will allow me to get a search for a monster. So just double checking to make sure that I'm not going to be doing any kind of misplays, because again, this isn't a deck that I'm 100% familiar with. It's a deck that I'm trying to still, when I say familiar, I know what the cards do, but it's just working out combo lines and seeing what you can do, because there's a lot of lines, a lot of routes that you can take with this deck, especially with the ability to go into the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche and get Fog Blades on field, etc. So I was just thinking about my options here, deciding what I wanted to do next. So decided to add the Symbol Skeleton. Oh, sorry, I decided to add a monster from the banished pile, which was the Symbol Skeleton that I used last turn. And then I was able to activate Orchestrated Return to draw 2 cards by sending the Orcust monster to grave. Or was it Orcust Nightmare? I believe it could have been Orcust Nightmare that I am adding grave, and then I banished Orcust Nightmare to be able to dump another monster from deck to grave. So you do have to target a monster on field to increase its attack, and I am now locked into darks, so I can only special summon dark monsters for the rest of the turn because I've used Orcust Nightmare effect. So then I decide to banish my World 1 from graveyard to special summon back the Orcust Nightmare. I still haven't normal summoned yet, ladies and gents, which is just crazy. So just checking my extra deck here, I wanted to keep my Orchestrated Crescendo live. I potentially could have went into a Link 4 and just started destroying stuff, but me knowing the Thunder Dragon Mutant deck and the ability to recur itself and just get monsters on field or onto the board, I decided to kind of play it a bit more conservatively and just really think about what it is that I want to do to be able to get to the next turn. So I'm just checking my graveyard here, seeing what potential plays that I could have. I decide to attack with Nightmare Unicorn for 22. I think I was checking Galatea's attack in the graveyard. Again, just having a little bit of discussion, having to think about which card I'm going to be able to put onto the field. I decide to go into the second Galatea. Activating Galatea's effect to shuffle back in a monster and then set a Orcust spell or trap from my deck straight onto the field. Now in this instance, I've kind of burnt through my crescendos. I've used my babble. I only play 2 crescendos and 1 babble, as well as 2 orchestrated returns. So I decided to set the return. Now, to be honest, I didn't need to do that. I could have drawn into it, but in my head, I wanted to make sure that my deck was thinned enough to be able to draw into some more critical pieces rather than drawing into some supplementary engines. Now, the orchestrated return will come in clutch at some point. It just basically fuels the graveyard and adds cards to hand. So my opponent's just checking his graveyard, checking his banish power to see what effects he can potentially pop off with. And Galatea is actually face up, pointing to the zone in the middle of the board, which is something quite critical here. So he decides to discard his Thunder Dragon Hawk to special summon his Thunder Dragon Roar back from the banish pile, which is fine. He's then checking his extra deck just to see what options he has. Now do remember, I do want to use my orchestrated crescendo once again. So he normal summons DD Scout Plane, which is interesting. And in that instance, I decide to activate one of my Orcust monsters' effects to dump a Symbol Skeleton to grave. I believe it was an Orcust Nightmare I banished to be able to dump Symbol Skeleton to grave. Now again, this is all down to timing, ladies and gents. Obviously I've got Dingisu in the graveyard, so that's a potential send, but I just want to make sure that my opponent exhausts a lot of his resources before I decide to interact with his cards. So the 2 cards that are on field at the moment, they're not really much of a issue. However, IP Masquerena is a bit of an issue. So he decides to go into IP Masquerena, checks his graveyard to see what potential he has left. He decides to banish 2. I think it's a light and a dark monster to be able to special summon the Chaos Creator. Now he actually placed it in the middle column, ladies and gents, which means Galatea can't be destroyed by battle. So then, because a couple of monsters were banished, he's able to, I think it was the Thunder Dragon Roar, which was banished, and then obviously he banished the Thunder Dragon Matrix. So Matrix gets to add to hand, and then Thunder Dragon Dark hits the field, which is again, it's another body. So the way that this deck can just go through monsters, it's crazy. You do need to remember the combo lines with this. It can be a bit tricky to play, especially if you're not too sure how to navigate your field, but again, he's doing a stellar job at the moment, and this will be a very powerful board. So again, he's thinking here, he wants to go into the Nightmare Unicorn to be able to shuffle back my Galatea. So he does go into Unicorn, I believe. So I'll wait for him to wait for him to discard first and foremost, because it has to discard for cost. You target to my Galatea, and then I chain the second Orcust Crescendo, which will negate and banish that card, which is just absolutely powerful. So then he decides to attack into my Galatea with with the Chaos Creator, or he's thinking about attacking. He's checking his field, and he realized that Galatea is actually linked to the Chaos Creator, which means I'm just going to take battle damage, and Galatea is going to stay on field. So again, he's just checking his banish pile, checking his graveyard, seeing what potential he has. He decides to get back a Thunder Dragon Matrix via Chaos Creator's effect, and he's got one card in hand. Goes into Thunder Dragon Fusion and activates his Thunder Dragon Fusion to special summon Thunder Dragon Titan to the field. Big problem right here. Or is it? Yes, ladies and gents, I've been holding my effects. I noticed that Titan hit the field, and I'm thinking to myself, on resolution, as soon as he's shuffled up his deck, I'm going to banish the Symbol Skeleton to special summon Dingirsu to the field, because I don't want Titan to just go around and start destroying everything on field. So I target the Titan, and funnily enough, Titan's protection doesn't activate under Dingirsu, because Dingirsu does not destroy. It sends from field to graveyard non-targeted. So really powerful right there. So just cutting his deck. He's out of resources at the moment. He's got Chaos Creator on field. He decides to attack into the Galatea. Again, the Galatea is linked, so she won't be destroyed. And then I believe we were just discussing what should happen next. Again, he's checking his extra deck just to see what potential plays he could have. Playing with a face-up extra deck, might I add, but is what it is. So I believe I was checking Galatea's effect to shuffle back in a monster. I just wanted to check if it was something that needed to be done in order to set an Orcust Spell Trap, but this Orcust Spell Trap set is optional, ladies and gents. So the shuffling of the monster is optional, and the Orcust Spell Trap is optional. So it is something that you can activate even if you don't have any targets left in your deck. So he's out of resources, no cards in hand. Chaos Creator's on 22 or 2300 attack, I believe. He's also got a Thunder Dragon Matrix on field. So I dropped the Danger Ogopogo. Let's play that Danger game, ladies and gents. So no need to dice roll, you can just choose at random. I can't remember what card he dumped off Danger Ogopogo, to be honest. But Ogopogo hits the field, I get a draw, and I believe I draw into a Foolish Burial, which is fantastic. So I activate Foolish Burial. To dump a monster from deck to graveyard. Now bear in mind, ladies and gents, I haven't been into Rusty Bardiche as yet. And that's something that definitely can cripple any follow-up plays my opponent has. So again, just looking for a target. I'm trying to decide what to do. I could potentially have lethal if I'm able to correctly navigate the board and obviously get enough damage on board to be able to OTK. So in this instance, I decide to... I'm considering my options here. So I decide to link off the Dingirsu and the Galatea for a Rusty Bardiche. So Rusty Bardiche will get a dump to be able to set a Phantom Knight Spell or Trap from deck straight onto the field. So obviously I show my opponent Fogblade. So I dumped Cloak to the grave. So then I banish Cloak to be able to add my Boots from deck to hand. Obviously I'm not fearing any kind of hand trap. My opponent's got 2 monsters on field and that is it. Dwindled him out of resources, which is a little bit rough, but hey, that's Yu-Gi-Oh at times. So special summon my Boots to the field because I control a Phantom Knight monster in the form of Bardiche. Now I'm still thinking here, I really want to make sure that Boots hits the graveyard so I can banish it to be able to add another Fog Blades from deck to hand. So I haven't used any Orcust effects which lock me into darks. So what I decide to do is link off the Boots and the Danger Ogopogo to be able to get my Boots into the graveyard. Just because he could top deck anything, it could be crazy. Like he could top deck a Raigeki, for example, which would buy him a turn or potentially buy him some time. And it's just good practice to be able to kind of like make sure that you've definitely got game on board. So I'll go into Nightmare Phoenix. Obviously, I don't need to resolve its effect. I banish the Boots from the graveyard to be able to set a Phantom Knight's spell or trap, or add the Phantom Knight's card from deck to hand. So in this instance, it's going to be another copy of Fog Blades. Then I'm just checking my graveyard here, and this is the play right here, ladies and gents. I banished the Symbol Skeleton to special summon back my Dingirsu, and then because I special summoned Dingirsu to Rusty Bardiche's arrow, I can pop a monster on field, and I can also send a card via Dingirsu's effect, which is absolutely crazy. So his board is actually clear now, and I believe that is enough for game, ladies and gents. Well, ladies and gents, we find ourselves at the end of another video as my opponent decided to scoop, had 0 resources left and a couple of Fog Blades on field. He probably wouldn't have been able to do a lot because it's a monster heavy deck. So if you did enjoy this content, ladies and gents, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all that wonderful good stuff, and I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoy. Peace.